Welcome to Shut Up and Sit. I'm Yedda Stancil, a consciousness coach and consultant. I'm on a mission to bring mindfulness to the modern world. Each week, we will offer ancient healing practices, real-world examples, and the latest research in neurobiology and behavior change into fun conversation that invites you to wake up your highest self. Now, let's go shut up and sit. So today I thought we would start a little bit just to kind of understand this is our very first episode ever of the Shut Up and Sit podcast. A little bit exciting, a little bit of terrifyingness. There's stuff going on and we're just kind of in it here. And I thought on this very first episode, I'd tell you a little bit about me, a little bit about the Shut Up and Sit movement, what it is, what it isn't. And this is going to be a little bit different than some of the other podcasts that you guys have listened to because I'm not always going to have a guest. Sometimes you just get me. So today you've got me and actually you also have Griffin who's behind the camera and behind the magic of the sound today, who you don't get to see. Maybe you will get to hear from him. All of a sudden my brain is like, it's kind of like Howard Stern has Robin. Maybe like, Yedda has Griffin. So we'll see. Maybe you'll get to hear and see from him too, but he's behind the scenes. And it's just an honor to be here and just talk a little bit about this whole idea. And if you're here, you're curious enough to go, well, I kind of want to know what she's got to say. You might also be wondering, what the hell? What is, I don't want to hear somebody tell me to shut up and sit. I don't know about you, but that was a form of punishment for me as a kid. And I decided through my journey, through my story, that I wanted to reclaim that narrative, that I wanted to learn how to use silence to be my friend and just understand a little bit more about that. So I thought, I know how to do this. And I thought today I could tell you a little bit about my story and how I got there and why I call this whole thing Shut Up and Sit. It may speak to you, it may not, and that's totally cool. But it is something I think that everybody in the world at some point in their life has been told to shut up and sit down probably. So when we think about this and we talk about what this show is going to be about, for me, I think that one of the things, I was making some notes for this show earlier this morning, and I read this really cool quote, and it said, "Self-love is the greatest middle finger of all time." And I thought, oh man, that's really cool, because there's this kind of paradox to Shut Up and Sit and paradox to the work that I have, where it is a pattern interruption when we bring two things that don't normally go together, and people go, oh, now I'm curious, what's going on? And so I thought, whoa, self-love being the greatest middle finger of all time. And you know what the problem is, that the whole reason this whole show and this movement was born was I didn't know how to love myself. And I had to learn how to do that. And honestly, if you're listening right now, I'd be willing to bet either you don't know how to love yourself fully, or you're still in the question of how to do that, because people that go into the personal development space, whether they go in as a student and or then become a master, or they're on either end of that spectrum or that question, they're ultimately, and what I believe that the world's biggest problem is right now, is a lack of love. We could drill it all down. People want power, they want position, they want money, they want success, they want all these great things in life. But ultimately, what I found at the root of all that was what people really want most, what the world needs most, is love. And that sounds a little cliche, but that's actually the truth of what we're talking about. And so this whole idea of shut up and sit and really discovering self-love for me came about 8 years ago. And so, I was in this constant narrative most of my life, and I'm sure many of you can relate, but, I was asking myself, all the questions about how do I get joy? How do I get unlimited abundance? How do I get into areas of success and freedom? I just felt trapped. I felt like I just, no matter what I did, I just had to work harder, either to keep it going or to get more of it. And so 8 years ago, I had what I wouldn't have called a gift then, but I had a wonderful experience where if you could imagine an Olympic diver up on a high dive, and all of the world watching, and this diver is standing there. And just imagine that for the sake of the story, that diver is me, and I'm standing there with my tippy toes, my back to the water, getting ready to do this phenomenal, like backflip, triple somersault, pirouette, perfect entry into the pool. I mean, I nailed it. I did the most phenomenal, amazing feat in front of all of the world to see, except there was only one problem. There was no water in the pool, and I hit the bottom and the concrete and just splatted. That's the actual story I tell a lot of my clients about my ego. And when that happened, I didn't know what to do. And when I didn't know what to do, thankfully, the deeper part of myself, I tell people, I call that my soul, came along with a bucket and just scooped me up off the bottom of the swimming pool and kind of put me in a pail. And I started walking around, asking a lot of questions and seeking a lot of answers. And through that process, I was able to figure out how to love myself. But that's the imaginative story of my ego. But the reality was that I was living a life where I wasn't living in integrity. I was on the outside. The world would see me and they would see this beautifully poised, perfectly manicured perfection that I thought that I was attaining or had attained. I had the perfect life. I had a Greek god for a husband, gorgeous, fit, would have done anything for me, amazing kid, literally had the house with the white picket fence. And I'm kind of ashamed to admit, I even had the Range Rover Evoque with my name on the license plate. So there was a lot of outer things in the world that at the time I thought defined who I was. I was running several businesses very successfully. I'd been on the cover of magazines. I was actually an international wellness consultant for a very well-known, which will remain nameless in this episode. As you get to know me, you'll probably learn more, but I will keep that nameless for now. But I was on international television. I had a lot of great international mentors. And so I really thought I had my shit together. But the truth was, when I would go to sleep at night, there was this little voice that would just keep me awake. It was this constant chatter. I wasn't enough of this. I didn't do this well enough. I didn't have enough of that. I could have done better here. Why did that person do this? And so this constant dialogue that was running in my head, it was troublesome. So what did I do? I just did more of the pursuing. And I might have had wine to deal with it. I might have gone out and had fun with friends, and I would have done a better job at learning how to be a good parent. I would have done millions of things to try to get that voice to shut up, but it never did, and it never would. And so, again, 8 years ago, when I did my ego did that beautiful dive off of the high dive for the whole world to see. That event actually happened shortly after I went out to an event with Deepak Chopra out in California. And I worked with him. If you don't know Deepak Chopra, you guys can look him up. But I worked with him on that weekend, literally stood arm in arm with Deepak, like close enough to kiss him. And he said, "Yedda, what do you want?" And I thought, man, what do I want? Oh man, I want wisdom. I said this literally to Deepak. I said, I want the archetype of Athena. I'm ready to take over the world. And he was so wise. And he looked at me and he said, "Are you prepared for ignorance?" And I thought, that's the stupidest thing anyone could have ever said to me. What am I prepared for? I'm done with ignorance. And actually, Deepak was right, because when I left that event, I thought I was just going to keep going higher and higher and higher. And I came home from that event and my 20-year marriage ended. One of my businesses closed. My son was in high school. We were dealing with a lot of challenges with his dyslexia, his athletics, and giving him things to keep him busy to find his own stride. So we had a lot of things that just kind of erupted in our lives. And in that moment, I thought I was going up and everything fell apart. And so I found myself standing there on that high dive, thinking I was going to do the most perfect entry into the pool to get the perfect 10 from all the judges, only to find out there were no fans in the seat. There was no water in the pool. And that big, huge breakdown ended up leading me to a beautiful breakthrough. And that breakthrough was me picking myself up off the pool. My first thought was, well, I'll go to therapy, because that's what we all do, right? I've got a problem, I'll go to therapy. And I walk in, I pull up in my little Range Rover. I've got my perfectly poised suit on. My hair is done to the exact, everything's perfect, because I've been seeking perfection my entire life. And I walk in and I look at the therapist and I said, "Hey, so I'm here to learn about love. And so I just need you to, is there a book? Is there a schematic? Can you just draw something out on the board for me there? Because if you could just teach me what love is, I'll be good to go." And I remember he looked at me and he said, "I can't help you." And I thought, "What do you mean you can't help me?" And he said, "But I know somebody that can." And there was this little old lady, a few minutes on the other side of town, and she was going into semi-retirement. She practiced from home. So if you all could imagine, like she wasn't really the Dr. Ruth, because this wasn't about sex. It was more about, this inner work of suffering. But literally she answered the door and she looked like Dr. Ruth. She's a short little old curmudgeon of a lady. And I thought, oh my God, he sent me to like Dr. Ruth's lookalike clone. And I thought, I'm not here because I'm a sex addict. And then I thought, oh my God, am I? Maybe I really am. And I don't know that. Because the truth is there wasn't anything in my life that was working. And in my marriage for me and my husband, there was a lot of deceit. There were a lot of lies, and there was a lot of looking outside the marriage to try to figure out who I was. And, and I do regret that. But here I am standing here with this woman trying to figure out what love is. And she invites me into this little bedroom upstairs and sits down and just starts to talk to me. And I looked at her and I said, I feel like I am the world's worst person. I have hurt people I love. I have lied. I have cheated. I have really fucked up everything for everybody. I mean, it was no joke when I say I was carrying myself around, in a bucket. I was a hot fucking mess. And I'll never forget, she just looked at me and she said, sounds like somebody gave you some really shitty patterns, and we need to talk about them and figure out what they are. So that journey started me into this self-discovery process to figure all this out. Now, without belaboring and getting to, I'm sure you're like, well, where's the punchline yet? What does shut up and sit have to do with all this? I did 2 years of amazing therapy with this woman. She was great. She helped me to figure out, to see all of the aspects of who I was, who I wasn't. But that was just the beginning. When we go into this journey, this personal discovery journey, therapy is an archaeological dig that looks back and it says, okay, where did you come from? What made you who you are right here today? And then what I learned was coaching is what turns us to look at, where are you headed? Where are you going? And so the lady said, well, it's been 2 years and my retirement is here, so I can't help you anymore. And I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do now? Well, luckily, the universe always has a plan, and the next piece fell in line for me, and I met a lady called Gina, and she told me, actually, she was referred to me by a friend, and I was his wife, and I went and met with her one day. I walked in her office, and she had 2 chairs. That was it. There were only 2 chairs, and I said, I'm here. Somebody recommended that you would be a great person to help me. Now, Gina was an Episcopal priest, still is, but she had a gift where she would sit with people. So that kind of intrigued me. I'm like, what do you mean you sit with people? So I started doing all the therapizing that I had done with the little old lady at her house. And Gina said, that's all really great and really interesting, but now it's time for you to just have a seat in the chair and be quiet. So my inner narrative said, oh God, she just wants me to shut up and sit down. And that triggered a lot for me because my entire childhood I was told to shut up and sit down, put a chair in the corner, put my nose into the corner, and literally just disappear. Nobody wanted to hear what I had to say. All these patterns of I wasn't good enough. And punishment, silence was a form of punishment for me. So I thought, oh my God, I just shut up and sit. And what happened was I would go to her twice a month and I would sit for an hour. Literally, there were 2 chairs across from each other in a small room, and she'd crack the window and we would close our eyes and we would just sit in silence. And what I learned through that process was I had never, ever used that narrative, shut up and sit, to go within to figure out who I was. I actually heard it and was programmed to think silence was actually my enemy. And what I learned in the silence was things started to begin to move. Things started to shift. I actually learned that in that shut up and sit down process, that constant mental chatter that was plaguing me every second of the day, it started to get a little bit quieter. And then the quieter it got, I started to notice there were these little specks, these milliseconds of complete and total peace that would come in between the thought, in between the breath of sitting there. And I thought, oh my God, this is really cool. And then what I started seeing was the more I practiced and cultivated silence and stillness inside of me, I would actually go out into the world, and in between sessions, I would literally, it was like scary. I would be like, oh my God, I totally just didn't yell at that guy who just cut me off in traffic. What's happening to me? Or I'd be in line at the store and I'm like, hey, it's cool that the register's down and, the power's gone out and everything in my bag is melting, but I'm good. I'll just hang out here and just chill. And I started to get really curious and say, this is fascinating. How is it that this silence and stillness can actually do so much when I really didn't feel like I was doing anything at all? So I put together the years of therapy that I was able to break down of my own human patterns and condition. And then I put together this really cool, exciting way of, I thought it was really sexy. I was like, yeah, oh, you go to a therapist? Oh, I go to a lady and we just sit together. And they're like, what? And I'm like, it was so exciting and almost kind of like provocative to think that I held everything inside of me that I needed and that I didn't have to go to anybody else to find it. The answers were just coming through the silence. So I learned how to marry those together in my own journey. I healed a massive amount of trauma and grief and addiction and attachment in layers after layers after layers of my own childhood. We all have it. We all have a story. Somebody somewhere programmed all of us with shit that isn't ours. And somehow we've taken it on as our own identity is what I learned. And then what I learned was, and are you guys ready for this? Nobody ever talks about this. I didn't realize that the ego that was out in the world doing all these things, getting on magazines and helping people and, what I thought were good things, I didn't realize that the ego wasn't really who I was. And that might be news to you. It may not be news to you. But even if that is not news to you, we don't have a system or a structure in place in our personal development industry to teach people, well, what do you do once you figure out your ego is not who you are? And so what I found was what a lot of people do is they just take the next best thing. So maybe they get addicted to yoga, or maybe they get addicted to some other way of being. It might be religion. It might be a movement, a cause. It might be an addiction. They just simply replace the thing that they were trying to fix with something else. And so I started meeting a lot of people in these different places. And I thought, well, that's cool. Maybe you meditate and do yoga and drink green juices and, practice all these cool things, but you're still working really hard at the doing. And you haven't shut up and sat down long enough to really connect with the being. And so that kind of started me on a journey to start to say, so what do I do with my ego now? So I've got her in this really big bucket, and it was a massive bucket because my ego was massive. And I started pulling parts and pieces of her back out and started to learn, what do I do with my narrative? How do I integrate my ego back into the truth of who I really am? How do I call all parts of myself that I gave away to people over all these years? How do I get all that back? What do I do with that? In this personal development world, we talk about, you matter simply because you exist, or you're already whole, or I don't know for some of you guys, but namaste was always fascinating to me in yoga. I did that too. I was like, I'm just going to do yoga every day and I'll get better. So I'd go into yoga and they were like, oh, namaste, the light inside of me sees and honors the light inside of you. And I remember one time going, what does that even mean? The light inside of me sees and honors the light inside of you. And so I was in such a place of a curiosity that I started to piece together, and I started to learn how to figure out not only the ego isn't really who I am, but to really learn to let go of the ego, the false self. And not only in the letting go did I not pick up something else to replace it with, I just allowed myself to keep going deeper and deeper and deeper into the silence, deeper and deeper into the not knowing, and deeper into acquiring parts and pieces to figure out, well, what do you do with all of this now that you know the ego's not who you really are? And so instead of, and there are books out there, I read them, the ego's the enemy, you got to get rid of the ego's the problem. And I thought, man, I feel really bad. The ego's gotten a pretty bad rap. And yeah, the ego can do some pretty shitty things. But what I realized was that the ego is actually created when we are wounded at a very young age to protect us. And what happens, unfortunately, for most of us is when that wounding happens at that really young age, that other identity gets built, and its job is to protect us and actually create a little bit of separation so that people don't hurt us again. And then as we grow up, that wounded, smaller sense of self, that egoic self, we carry out into the adult world. And the problem with that is we don't have the data upgrades in our ego in order for it to work properly in the adult world. So what I offer through Shut Up and Sit, and you'll hear about that in a little bit in more detail, what Shut Up and Sit is an invitation, yes, to reclaim the narrative, yes, to go within, yes, to find the silence and the stillness. But really at the deepest level, it's to learn to love yourself. It's to learn to figure out how to use the ego and invite the ego back in to help you get all of the things that you desire. Because I got news for you. You're not going to find unlimited love, joy, freedom, abundance. I got all these really cool pages and notes here to make sure I tell you guys, which I may or may not have hit. But the truth is all these awesome things that we're all looking for. Forbes magazine says this, that the top things people are looking for right now in the world, they did a survey, was joy, happiness, money, freedom, success, peace. All of these are byproducts of self-love. And so I really did start to say, well, wait a minute. I can't learn to love myself if I don't love all of myself. And that included my ego. And so I started inviting her back into the conversation. I started in the silence and in the cultivation of stillness, finding the wisdom inside of me. And what I learned was that in silence, that's where source and that's where the soul speaks to us. It's an infinite amount of wisdom, but it's all inside here. It's not out there. So what Shut Up and Sit isn't, is it's not a product that's going to guarantee to fix your problems or to solve all of your suffering. Only you can do that. And this work in personal growth and personal development, coaching, all these buzzwords that are out right now, we're not answering that question. We're not helping people figure out how to take the wisdom inside of themselves to do what they need to do. We're making promises like, hey, walk across hot coals, read my book, take my seminar, join my community, we'll fix you. And then what happens is the ego just gets trapped into another thing of doing and doesn't get the privilege of shutting up and sitting down and taking a break and getting some rest to learn how to be. And so for me, it was important that I started to not only to learn that for myself, but I started bringing that out in my coaching services. I've been a coach and consultant for years in the business and entrepreneurial and leadership development space. And it was another thing to be like, oh, look at my ego. I'm so awesome. I travel the world and teach leadership and entrepreneurship. But I never really did the deeper dive into how do I partner the behaviors of who I am with the bottom line of not just the businesses I was running, but the bottom line of life. So I started bringing this work gradually out into what I was doing with my clients. And I started seeing, oh my gosh, it wasn't a fluke. It didn't just work for me. It works for everybody. So this integrative process of figuring out how your identity is made of your own behavior, your environment, your aspirations, your mindset. That's the model that we use in the Shut Up and Sit program. It's an integrative development model. I did a lot of deep dive and work with Dr. David Drake. I became a certified narrative coach through this process. I got certified in integrative development. I did not one, but two mindfulness certifications. One was in mindfulness, one was in meditation. Yes, they're different. We'll talk about that along the way. And so I did such a deep dive into knowing. And as I started grabbing this information, not only was I knowing, but then I also had to work with not knowing. What did I not know about this? And so I put together this work. And so I don't have the answers for you, but I'll tell you what I do have. I have a process and I have a system of teaching you how to figure out how to get those answers for you. That's what makes what I do different. That's what makes Shut Up and Sit different. That's why we had to come up with, somebody said, well, early on, like, what do you do with your clients? And I thought, I don't know if this is appropriate, but I'm like, I just tell them to shut up and sit down and listen to who they are, to figure out what they really want, to start to listen, but also then to start to dialogue with their own ego. We've put the responsibility on everybody else to make us feel good, to fix us, to make us feel better. We've put the responsibility that everyone else has done something to us. And that's a victim mindset. And I'm just not, this isn't the episode, we'll get there. But we've all lived a life where we've been a victim, or we've put our responsibility for our happiness and all the things that Forbes said we're looking for in our life. People are expecting other people to give it to them. Now, if that doesn't speak to you, hey, no problem. Pass this show on to somebody else, because I can promise you, I did the research, 87% of the world lives in lack, shame, doubt, fear, blame, victim, negative mindset. So when we hear 87% of the population live in this, that means when you walk into a room, and I suck at math, so I'm just going to round that to 90%. If there's 10 people in a room, that means one person is not in that category. So 9 out of every 10 people, this message is for you. I know that to be a fact. I run into people like this all the time. And here's the other cool part about Shut Up and Sit. We have a moral obligation when we begin to find our own wholeness, when we integrate back into and really wake up and start to see that it all resides in us. When we find our own wisdom, I believe we have a moral obligation to use that wisdom to invite other people to find their own wisdom. So with Shut Up and Sit, you do get a process, you get a guide, you get some awesome coaching, you get lots of cool content, but it's real, it's gritty, it's funny, it's wildly inappropriate at times. Why is that? Because we got to have a sense of humor with all of this. Humor is the one thing, humor and imagination and creativity allow us to see things differently. And so I wanted to marry this part of being real. I wanted to keep parts of my ego because I thought she was really fucking cool. I didn't want to get rid of her, but I wanted to invite her back into the conversation. And so as I married narrative coaching, as I married integrative development, mindfulness, meditation, my first career in behavior change in the health and wellness industry, what I found was I had created something that was a process, that had a roadmap, if you will. It was a guide, and it integrated and combined 48 years of experience and life's knowledge. But what it did was it still left freedom for the individual to find their own sense of self, their own sense of power, and their own wisdom as they did the work. So my message isn't do what Yedda did to get what Yedda got. My message through Shut Up and Sit is shut up and sit down and go within. Do the work to figure out who you are so you can bring all of your awesomeness out into the world and stop trying to be a second-rate version of somebody else. And so with that, I just thought in this first episode, I needed to talk about that a little bit. You know, this is not the normal, this isn't going to be the normal podcast. I'm not going to bring an interview person in every week and be like, and today I'm talking to Matthew McConaughey, which actually would be kind of cool. So, you know, maybe one day we will, because I kind of think he's hot. But I'm getting sidetracked. Here's the deal. So I'm not going to always have somebody in this chair. And if I do, they're not always going to be famous. My hairdresser's really amazing. She's done the work. She's figuring out who she is. She's found the happiness, the joy. The deal is we don't have to be extraordinary to make a difference because we're all extraordinary. And so this ordinariness of life that the ego has gotten tired of, who wants to tell you, you should look more like Kim Kardashian. You should be, you know, more like, some famous person out there in the world, whether it's a movie star or a musician or, we're so addicted to following other people's lives on social media, on YouTube, on videos. Here's the deal. I don't want you to get addicted to following me. I'm not the perfect example, but here's what I am. I am someone who's hit the bottom and come back up and looked at it from a different perspective and said, how do we all wake up? How do we all find that love inside of ourselves, that love for source, for self, that we can take out into the world so that we can love others? And so as we go on this journey together and you hear what I have to say, there's lots of tools, lots of resources. I've decided actually as we get started on this Shut Up and Sit journey together, I have a book. So when I was doing this coaching process with clients, I had clients say, can you put this in a workbook? Great, wrote an awesome workbook. Well, the workbook turned into clients saying, hey, can you teach a course to my employees or to my friends and family, to the community that I live in? So sure, we took the workbook and went out of the one-on-one coaching and then carried it over into group settings to coach people. And then in that experience, people said, do you have like a 6x9 version of this book? Like, just a regular book, because the workbook's really cool. It kind of looks like a little, I call it like a Tiffany catalog. It's really cool. And so we made a smaller book and said, yeah, let's take out all the workbook parts where you get to write all this down. And let's just put a book together so that people could just read it. And one woman said, I'd really love for my husband to have this information. Another gentleman said, I'd really love for one of the ladies I work with to have this information. So this has been an ongoing journey and a cultivation to figure out how to meet people where they are. So there are lots of ways you can engage with this community, with this movement. The podcast is just one, and it's kind of our entry point. So I got to sitting there and I thought, okay, great. So a lot of people are asking for this. I'm moving outside of my individual one-on-one coaching clients. I'm doing courses. I've got a book that people can buy and share. Because then, if you're doing this work and you're waking up and you're figuring out how to love yourself completely and how to bring your best self out into the world, you can't not share it. It doesn't work that way. Love cannot be contained, people. So as that started to happen, I started thinking, well, yeah. And one client said, can you just start recording? Like, you say some cool stuff and I forget it. And I make all these, little notes. This is my Yedda-ism. And that's kind of how the podcast got born was, I can shut up and sit down. I can be silent. I can shut up and sit down and I can talk for a really long time too. And so I thought, we could put this on podcast, but here's what's going to be different about this show. Like I said, sometimes you're going to have some really cool people in here who've done the work with me, who've helped me to create the work. Sometimes you're going to hear from family and friends of mine, how we live this life, what this movement, what this Shut Up and Sit community has been for those of us that are in it day to day. Sometimes you're just going to hear from me. And I've actually decided that the content that's in the workbook, that's in the book, I'm going to actually incorporate and teach on parts of it every single time I hop on and chat with you guys. Why do I want to do that? Well, it would take you 52 weeks to get all the content that's out of the workbook and book on the show. And if you just want to wait a year and go like piece by piece by piece to figure that out, it's yours for free. Do it, go for it. If you decide that you want to move through those different stages of change and work maybe on your own in a book or in a group with a course or work directly with me one-on-one or have me come in and work with your company, you can do that. But it was important to me that this all come about in a way that meets people where they are, because I'm not here to sell anybody anything. I'm here to serve. I want to serve, but I want to do this in an integrative manner. I want to do it where your ego has permission. So your ego's got to know that this shit's fun. It's cool. You still get to wash your hair. You can still shop at Nordstrom or Target or wherever you go. You don't have to give up everything in your life in order to find out who you are. I'm giving you permission, and I'm going to show you a way that your ego can work with you and not against you. Because your ego is what picks up the fork and feeds you every day. Your ego is what told you to brush your teeth today. Your ego is what made you look in the mirror to be like, do I have am I presentable? Am I going to go out into the world and at least, show a product of something that is presentable? So we're not trying to get rid of the ego here. All right. That's not what Shut Up and Sit is. And I think that's important because right now your ego is listening to this and it's going to start giving you some chatter if it hasn't already. And so I'm not only talking to your soul, and your soul actually doesn't need words. It actually loves the silence because it always knows what to do. It never imparts the will on the body or the mind. It just sits in silent, still awareness. The body will impart its will on the mind and the soul with desires for pleasure, aches, pains, lots of energetic stuff, which we'll get into in the show. And then the mind is always imparting its will on the body and the soul. And it's in constant chatter. It never stops talking. The thoughts keep going. So what we're going to do with this whole process and this whole movement of Shut Up and Sit is give you the tools to help you to figure out how to shut up and sit down and go within, find the silence, how to learn to work with the body, the mind, the soul, integrate the parts and pieces of you together, and then bring that ego into the space that says you belong. You did a lot of great work for a lot of great years. And we're not getting rid of you. We're just giving you a little upgrade. We're giving you a little makeover. We're going to ask you to work with us instead of against us. So that's what makes this work different. Also, the people that know me in my life know I don't like boring. I don't do mundane. And so I wanted to bring something different to the personal growth and development movement. And where I'm talking to you guys from today is the studio that I own called the Mindfulness Bar. And the Mindfulness Bar is a really cool, fun place to come and learn to sit with your suffering. No, we don't serve alcohol. But what we do is we teach clients individually and in group and in small settings here how to come and sit with their suffering and how to learn to be with it and to know that they don't have to let the ego and all of the extreme things like clinging and addiction and negativity and shame take over and keep them protected by separating. We actually created a safe space that says the ego can just calm down, take a break, and through connection and coming back home to who you are, and being around like-minded people and in an environment that helps you to attain the behaviors, to actually accomplish the aspirations, and to have the right mindset to go out into the world to be who you really are, that happens here. So we're going to be here every week that we come to you at the Mindfulness Bar. We're going to have some really cool conversations. It's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting. There may be times that it's not. I got to be real. There might be times where we might shed a tear and get kind of real. I don't know where it's all going to go. But what I wanted to do was start this first episode to tell you a little bit about who I am, what I do, what's the show going to be about. You got here because your soul figured out and your own wisdom thought this was a good place for you to land and for you to listen. And if you're still listening, it's your wisdom that's making the decision to do the next right thing. It's not me making you do the next right thing. So if you're looking for empowerment, if you're looking for freedom, if you're looking for expansiveness, success, abundance, love, peace, joy, you name it, I could list it. The only way that you're going to find it is if you shut up and sit down and go within. And I'm here to take you on that journey. And I am so excited to be on this journey with every single one of you listening. And I can't wait till we come back next time. Next week, when we come back, we're going to be digging into some of the work that's in the book. You're going to hear a little bit about my personal story in a little more detail. And I'm going to have a really cool guest. I'm going to have my mom here. She's going to talk a little bit about what it was like to be a mom at 17, barefoot, literally pregnant, and on her way to the justice of the peace to get married to my dad, and how we went from that place of absolute poverty and despair into a life of success and abundance. And my mom's been one of my biggest fans and one of the biggest advocates to help me create the model and process I'm going to be sharing with you. She's one of the ones who, thankfully, it's so weird, who used to tell me to shut up and sit down as a kid. And you know what I realized? That form of punishment from my parents actually was a gift. That's where the wound became for me my wisdom. Because when I did have to finally shut up and sit down and do the work, I thought, oh, I know how to do this. I've been doing this my whole life. So if you're listening today and you think you don't have what it takes to get quiet, to stop the mental chatter, to go within, to listen, to do this work, I'm here to tell you, you're probably wrong. And the reason I know that is because every one of us here in the United States was actually parented that way. So you have the capacity to do this work. You know how to do it. You just haven't put it together in that way before. So I'm looking forward to connecting with all of you next week. So much cool stuff. And before we go, I got to do a couple of these. I'm learning all this. People are like, you got to do an intro and an outro on a podcast. So I got to tell you where to go and what to do if you want to learn more. So I have a really cool website. You can go to shutupandsit.com. We have a really cool little assessment there that helps you figure out, where are you on this journey? Where do you need to start? What product is the best entry point for you? Because the work actually meets people where they are, as opposed to the other way around. So you can go to the website. You can take that assessment. You can learn a little bit more about that. And most importantly, before you go, at the end of every one of our podcasts, I think this is the coolest thing ever. We actually start our show and end our show with a really cool song called Kindness by my very good friend and partner in mindfulness, Ben Glover. And Ben was actually the recording artist of the year in the UK, album of the year in 2019. And he did this really cool song. He was actually in my mindfulness meditation 2-year certification program. And the song is called Kindness. And so what I would love for you to do before you check out and move on is take a few seconds, maybe a good solid minute, and just practice the art of shut up and sit and listen to music, because music is another way that we can get into this work. And Ben's actually singing this really cool loving kindness meditation actually in a song. So really cool Irish guys singing music, and they're certified meditation teachers. This stuff doesn't have to be boring, you guys. It's possible to bring all this mindfulness into the mainstream of the world and integrate it into this process of personal discovery. So hang out, chill for a little bit, listen to the loving kindness that Ben's offering you. And remember, no matter what, if no one else tells you today, you matter simply because you exist. Until next time, this was Yedda. Have a wonderful day.
May you know goodness. May you know peace. May you know contentment. May you be at ease. May the road before you be soft beneath your feet. may this be true. May you know kindness, may kindness know you. May you be without anger, may you be without hate, may you be without jealousy, may you be without shame. And if the world gets lost in sadness, may you find a prayer of hope. More than all, may this be true. May you know kindness, may kindness know you. More than all, may this be true. May you know kindness, may kindness know you. 'Cause even the beauty, even the pain will rise up and fall away. May you be with loved ones who hear and see what you feel. And may those you trust be honest and real. May your feet follow where your heart dares to go. But more than all, may this be true. May you know kindness, may kindness know you. More than all, may this be true. May you know kindness, may kindness know